Hello from Montreal in Canada. My name is Bob White. I'm a professor of anthropology at the University of Montreal, and I'm also the director of the Laboratory for Research on Intercultural Relations. First, I want to start by saying thank you to the organizers of the Glocal Knowledge Forum. It's an honor for me to participate from so far away and to be at least virtually a part of these discussions. Second, I would like to excuse myself for not being able to be with you live during the forum. Time and distance obviously are the source of this problem, but I'm very happy to be able to share some thoughts with you. And I hope that there will be more opportunities in the future to exchange with people in your part of the world doing this important work. So I'm going to begin right away, since we don't have very much time, with an overview of what I refer to as intercultural cities and intercultural policy and intercultural practice. This is a new field of work for professionals in local government. It's a new approach, I would say a new model. Some even refer to this as a new paradigm. And so I want to give you some general information about what interculturalism looks like and how it is mobilized in different urban settings, especially in municipalities. So why interculturalism and why now? We know that there are new forms of mobility as we speak, and also new forms of migration. This means that not only are there more people in our cities that come from abroad, but it also means that there are more types of people. And this is what my colleagues in social sciences refer to as superdiversity. So the idea that not only are there more migrants, but there are migrants from a larger number of backgrounds in terms of ethnicity, language, religious practices, from a larger number of nationalities and socioeconomic backgrounds, but also in terms of their legal or professional status. We also know that there is an increase in recent years in terms of populist sentiment and nationalist or nativist movements in many parts of the world, not only in North America and in Europe, and that this leads to an increase in terms of the number of events related to hate speech and different forms of overt and systemic discrimination. So one thing that we can observe in this current atmosphere of polarization and hostility is that the current political frameworks that we have seem to be not working very well. So there's a lot of questioning, thought-provoking discussions about what the best model is and how we should proceed. Interculturalism is proposed as one model. It's different from other models and other approaches. Interculturalism has a fascinating history, takes many forms. It's an approach that has emerged for the most part in the Americas, but in different places at different times. For example, in the case of intercultural or bicultural education in Latin America, interculturalism policy for the provincial government in Quebec, vis-a-vis a multiculturalism policy in the rest of Canada, and more recently, the case of intercultural cities in Europe, and that's the case that I'm going to discuss today. It's important to remember that interculturalism is not just a policy, but it refers to at the same time to three different levels, three different objects. The first is the basic social reality of people who interact with each other, but who come from different backgrounds. That's something that we can't really deny, but it's something that exists in all cities, and cities have always had intercultural dynamics. Second is interculturalism as a methodology, so a set of tools that researchers and practitioners use to analyze communication and breakdowns in communication in intercultural settings. And third, and this is the part that I want to talk about mostly, is the question having to do with interculturalism as a form of public policy, especially at the level of local governments. Intercultural dialogue, which is behind intercultural policy, is often perceived of as being focused on harmony or understanding between peoples. This is not false, but at some level it's kind of a misconception about interculturalism, because intercultural dialogue and intercultural practice begins with by looking at situations where people don't understand each other and where their different worldviews lead to different types of problems. So intercultural practice attempts to explain how misunderstanding can actually reproduce prejudice and can actually lead to new forms of discrimination and exclusion. In that sense, interculturalism is very focused on questions having to do with equality, equity, and justice. So the Intercultural Cities program, which is a part of the Council of Europe, very focused on this rights-based perspective and on the notion of equality, is a program that was created in 2008 with, I think, 8 or so pilot cities. And now it's a huge network spanning multiple continents with more than 145 member cities, a number of cities in Asia, as you know. They offer technical support, networking resources, the possibility to share information about best practices between cities. And they also offer this very useful tool, which is called the Intercultural Cities Index. I'm going to give some examples of that in a minute. What's interesting to note is that there are an increasing number of cities and networks outside of Europe, even though the program was initially created in Europe, especially in the Americas, where we have now 4 intercultural cities, including Montreal and Mexico City, and also in Asia with the first Asian intercultural city in Hamamatsu in Japan, and now a number of cities getting on board in Korea, which is very interesting. We'll see with the Korean case that their success in the program is very, very strong. So I'm going to continue now with some description of the ICC program and the model that they use to talk about intercultural cities. ICC works from this idea of basic idea of intercultural integration. This is a framework that's based on human rights and civic belonging. Cities, from this perspective, are uniquely positioned to affect change in terms of inclusion and integration of people coming from abroad. And in the ICC model, there's a lot of focus on what they refer to as the diversity advantage. So the possibility that local actors and decision makers look at diversity not as a problem, but more as an opportunity, not as a threat, but as an occasion an opportunity to make things better. And the ICC model tries to get away from models based on guest worker programs, so migrant workers. Obviously, the ICC model pushes back against the idea of assimilation, which is seen as negative. And it also suggests that the multicultural model is not perfect either, and that interculturalism is a way of going beyond multiculturalism, because interculturalism is focused more on positive interactions between people from different communities. So this is what ICC refers to as the policy triangle. These are the 3 basic principles that are used to evaluate municipal policy and to orient planning for programs and projects. It's a very useful tool. You can see interculturalism is here in the middle, and we have these 3 points on the triangle that are the basic pillars or principles of intercultural thinking. We begin with equality, the idea that all people are created equal, but we know that equality is difficult to obtain. So in ICC, they talk quite a bit about equity as a way of achieving something that's close to equality. Second is the recognition of diversity. As I mentioned, seeing diversity as something that's positive for all citizens and all societies. And third, and this is the part where the intercultural model is different from other models is there's a strong focus on interactions between individuals, between communities, and also between communities and local government. So this idea of promoting positive interactions is really at the core of the ICC model, and it's at the core of many intercultural models. This is how intercultural thinking is put into practice. One of the main tools that is promoted by ICC is the development of policy frameworks. I'm going to give you some examples of that in a minute. There's a great deal of diversity in terms of how these frameworks, policies are organized, but most policy frameworks follow, or most cities follow a similar process when they develop policy frameworks. And we've done quite a bit of research on this topic to see how cities organize themselves in terms of their policy frameworks. They usually begin by documenting local practice, and there's an analysis of the local context and potential obstacles. This is followed by a strategy for getting elected officials involved in the process because they're really important. Also collaborating with local researchers and analysts, and then designing different types of public consultation. Obviously, the steps are not always followed in the same order, because each city is like a different universe in and of itself. But most cities who have policy frameworks follow a similar process. In 2014, together with colleagues from the City of Montreal and the Council of Europe, we organized a forum on intercultural policy for cities. And this resulted in the publication of the book that you see here, Intercultural Cities, Policy and Practice for a New Era. There are 7 or 8 case studies in this book that talk about what cities have done to develop their own intercultural policy frameworks. And we're already working on the next publication, which will include case studies, hopefully from Japan. We would like to, if possible, see if we can have contributions also from Korea. The way that the ICC analyzes cities, the work that cities do, is through this main tool that they have called the ICC Index, which, as you can see here, includes 12 indicators. And these indicators are the criteria that ICC uses to measure policy outputs and programs designed by cities. I'm going to give you an example of what this looks like by looking at two cities in particular that have done very well in terms of the ICC index. But you can see that we have different areas, different sectors like education, governance, international outlook, business and labor. And a lot of cities are focusing more and more on this question of anti-discrimination. I'll give an example of that. The first example in terms of policy initiatives is the City of Montreal. This is the city that where I'm speaking to you from. My colleagues at the city are precious to me because we've worked together for a long time, and they've been doing work in this area for almost 30 years. So you might understand why Montreal does a good job in terms of the ICC index. Here, Montreal, for cities of the same size, Montreal usually comes in 4th or 5th place in terms of all the cities in the world. So you can see Montreal has a lot of expertise. But you can also see in this spider diagram that there are certain areas where the city needs to improve. So where the lines are far near the outside of the spider web, that means the city is doing well, like with international outlook or let's say with commitment. But where the line is closer to the center, that means the city needs to do a better job. So you can see how the city improved between 2011 and 2019. Some improvements, especially in the area of language, for example. I'm going to give you some examples of the policies or programs that Montreal has put into place through their inclusion plan. One is this International Observatory of Mayors living together. There's a great number of cities that participate in this observatory and contribute projects and programs that have to do with living together. The City of Montreal recently created a public consultation on systemic racism and discrimination, and they also appointed a commissioner to focus specifically on systemic discrimination within the city. So this is a very interesting development. The city also has started working on ID cards for residents These ID cards are available to people regardless of their citizenship status, and it gives non-documented workers and residents access to certain municipal services. The next example I want to discuss, because I don't have very much time left, is the city of Barcelona. Barcelona is also one of the original members of the ICC network, and they're often given as an example of a model city in terms of intercultural practice. You can see for their sample size, Barcelona, I think, is in 10th place, and they tend to also be in among the best cities in terms of their policy. You can see that they've done a good job in terms of welcoming, in terms of international outlook, mediation, commitment. And I think that question of commitment, you can see that very clearly in Barcelona's intercultural plan. The Barcelona City Intercultural Plan is one of the most elaborate anywhere in the world. They've just revised the plan for 2021. Whoops, that's my time's up. They just revised the plan for 2021. And you can see here that they have different components like the anti-rumor strategy, training for employees, language and culture center, and a series of intercultural projects. You can see this online. It's published, I think, in Catalonian, in Spanish, and also in English. Very interesting, the work they've been doing in the city of Barcelona. It's also interesting to look at what's going on in Australasia. There's an Australasian network of intercultural cities between Japan, Korea, and Australia. And I was very interested to see that cities in Korea, who are some of the most recent members of the network, have scored very, very high on the index. The results from these from the ICC index for Korean cities are spectacular. So congratulations to the people doing the work there. Just a few final comments about challenges for the future with regards to intercultural cities. We know that most migrants want to participate in their lives as new members of a new society, but certain groups and situations require additional effort or additional resources. So these are some of the areas to kind of keep focused on in the years to come. That cities, the research has shown that cities who have clear policy frameworks or clear orientations with regards to interculturalism, they do a better job with interculturalism, and they also have citizens in those cities tend to feel more positive and more stronger sense of belonging. There are ongoing issues with regards to the number of migrants and immigrants who participate in local government and who work as employees in local government. That's a huge challenge. And so cities are asking the question, how do we make it easier for people to get along well, but how do we make people feel like they belong to the city? And participation and representation are two important areas. And the last area is the question of multi-level governments. How do cities make sure that they are working together with regional and national governments? And how can cities be sure that they have the resources and the recognition they deserve to do this very important work on the ground? I think that ICC is a great example. When cities work together with other cities, they tend to do better, they tend to be more confident, and they tend to call a lot of attention to their work on the part of higher orders of government. So I'll stop there. I'd like to thank you once again for this invitation. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. I hope that we can exchange in person at some point in the future. Hope you have a nice conference, and congratulations for all the important work that you're doing.